Good evening. My name is Amarnath Praful, and I am an associate faculty at the Photography Design Program at National Institute of Design, Gandhinagar. I'm very excited to be part of this evening's program and to speak a bit about various questions and thinking about photo pedagogy in the South Asian region and how our institute and our program works or navigates it. So thank you, Connect ASAP. It's such a wonderful platform, and to be part of the many new different voices that is emerging out of the platform. It's really a fantastic opportunity. I thank Rahab for that, and he's also sent me a couple of questions, and we've been having conversations. So I'll try to do justice to the conversations that we've been having, and we'll try to get into the aspects and nuances. First things, let me introduce my program a bit, or the program I'm part of. I work in a Master's in Design program, in Photography Design program, as an associate faculty at the National Institute of Design, which is a design college. And we look at photography education and look at the idea of how to position photo pedagogy in the subcontinent. I think one of the first questions that Rahab had sent me referred to the curricula at NID and how it is navigating photo education or photography in the subcontinent. So the first point that I want to make is that when we look at history of imaging, which is such an integral part of our education, we try to introduce not just the canonical Western photography education, but also look at regionalities, geographies, and histories from the colonized world, the third world, India, Latin America, China, Japan, Africa, etc. Even though there is a vast lacune in finding and sort of engaging in a discourse with these histories, we try to make aware our students how to navigate, or the importance to navigate the camera of the colonized. At the same time, we try to look at the camera of the colonizer, if I may, and also subsequent possibilities and subsequent ways history has emerged out of it. And one great thing about the institute is that it also has a very good library. And one of the things that we have been very keen in the recent years, at least in the past 4 years, I've been trying to get as many publications and material for the library, online as well as physical, from the region. This includes also bilingual publication, whereas some of the matter in the publication or the book may be from another language, which is not legible to us. But if it has an English translation, we tend to take it forward. Another thing I wanted to talk about quickly is the students that they come with, the baggages or certain qualities that they come with. They come from different parts of India. We also had a robust exchange semester program where there were students coming in from outside India, and we had students going over. So we try to encourage students to respond to their own local ideas and regions, rather than trying to framework a kind of photographic education. We try to cater what can be reflective of one's own regionalities, languages, etc. Another quality that we think about is also a certain interdisciplinary attitude, which opens up, let's say, aspects of literature, aspects of drama, aspects of cinema history, aspects of dance or performance. All these things acts as a certain junctions connected to photography, which makes, let's say, photography education not just about the image, but also about the sociological condition from which the students come and to which the students respond. Um, so one of the key things, apart from the students' project, which we've seen that have really tried to navigate geographies, histories within India and sometimes abroad, uh, and crisscrossing between certain pasts and futures. Uh, Another important project that we do is the student dissertations. Uh, and dissertations in the context of photography design is that after the 2-year program, the 4-semester program, the students go on before registering for their master thesis to go to their native or wherever, native, not just from where they're coming from, but where they are also acquainted to, and try to collect, archive, either a photography collection of a photographer or a studio or an organization, etc. So the dissertation becomes a very, very important tool. We have now almost 70 such dissertation, which uh, it is from mostly all over India, from Kashmir to Kerala to up to the Northeast, uh, to even dissertations which feature images from the Union territories like Andaman and Nicobar, etc. And also ranging from as early as the 19th century to the 1980s. Um, One of the things, as I envision it or as I think about it, is also that the dissertation programmed in such a way that in time it becomes a part of history. It weaves a certain fabric in the history of Indian photography and sort of expands the conversation from the canonical or from just the European photographers who worked in India to native and, if I may say, vernacular possibilities of looking at the image. Another question that Connect ASAP had asked me, Rahab had asked me, was also regarding certain examples from these dissertations. We had also worked together 3 years ago with the dissertation um, in the form of exhibitions. I will give 3 examples from the dissertations. Uh, and examples which are very eclectic. One is the example of the archive that I had done when I was a student in the program by Rasak Kotakil, this photographer, photo artist, who was a photojournalist in Kerala in the 80s, but had a willingness and a mindfulness to make work for himself, which was very rare. And what he did eventually was to create a lexicon of photographers or photographs of writers in Kerala. Rasak, who wanted to be a writer, started to photograph the cultural zeitgeist of Kerala. And looking back now, it becomes a portrait of Kerala modernity, where photographs of Vaikom Muhammad Bashir or M.T. Vasudevan Nair, stalwarts in Indian literature, are depicted very methodically by Razak. Another recent example, one of the recent dissertations by Mudit Sharma, looked at the Pichwai backdrop and how people posed in front of it in Nathdwara. Look, he was trying to traverse various studios, collections, and archives and look at this very interesting typology of perhaps photography connected to worship, photography connected to idol worship. Another interesting dissertation or an eclectic facet from a dissertation is from Kritika Sriram's dissertation. These are all students of mine or the program. Kritika looked at the history of Dalit movements in Tamil Nadu, and one of the things, I mean, she also in one of her arguments, she also poses that these images, the images that certain associations, movements, they made of violence, of aftermath of violence against the Dalit community. They went to the studio to get developed, and the local studio person put a floral background or a floral border around it. So this opens up a very complex image. This also opens up a very complex aesthetic uh, in that sense. Um, so this was my sort of meandering towards explaining the dissertations. Another another question that came up, or another thing that I want to also speak about, is the landscape or the current landscape of photography in India, which is very interestingly and very empoweringly eclectic. And certain movements in terms of grants, in terms of this app itself, or let's say discussions between academic environments and practitioners, all in this media landscape where the images are floating, is truly interesting. And uh, one would really like to invest more in it and try to understand it. And another important, interesting conversation that emerged when we were speaking before this talk was also that of language. The idea of translation, the idea of loss in translation, the idea or quality of being bilingual, etc. So legibility or readability or photographic discourse, which operates in language rather than image, is very interesting. And we may have to, or the need of the hour is perhaps also to uh, invent or reinvent uh, a new accessible language for photographs to traverse in, to float in. And I think one of the major areas we can think about, or major qualities, is the vastness and difference in dialects, or different dialects and languages that we have in the region. And I think acts of translation, acts of bilingual publication, bilingual attitudes, and enabling or making a system in which photographic discourse can be made through vernacular language could be a new possibility that we all can collectively look forward to. So these are the things that I wanted to discuss.
Well, thank you, Amar, for those sort of meditations around photography and, of course, the department itself. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is with respect to South Asia once again.
Right.
In teaching, the various histories, and you talked about histories as well as the contemporary.
Yes.
In looking at these histories, does your sort of understanding of subcontinental histories really expand to the region as a whole? And how is that actually, taught in the university? So is there a kind of history of photography conversation that happens?
Absolutely.
And how do sort of young, practitioners sort of imbibe that history? A little more about that.
Yeah. Thanks, Rahab. Yes. So, yes, one of the key moments, as I said, or key sort of modules, as we call it, to take a pedagogical term, is history of imaging, which is revisited again it's introduced in the first and second sort of semesters, and later taken on again in the third and fourth. So which is actually an index course, which sort of opens up how to read history and what kind of histories we can read. So we always refer, my senior colleague and mentor, Rishi, always says histories. He keeps the S in the brackets, which I think is a very interesting way to look at it. So rather than saying that the canonical way in which photography emerged in Europe and then came to India, yes, true, that's true. But also we try to create another narrative, which is looking at the local aspect. So it starts from this indication, or this making students look at their own archive, their own personal archives, photographs that they had surrounded themselves with, along with, let's say, vernacular voices in India, um, so that somebody like Deen Dayal is as important as Oscar Regilander, for example. Or let's say when we are looking at some Beato, we'll also look at what he did in Burma or Sri Lanka for that matter. Thus, trying to sort of populate the reservoir of history from which the students can take up as a very diverse one. Recently, I took this class and there was such excitement in the students, and they asked me and they kind of challenged me also, very interestingly, that why is there so many less women in the history of photography? And we had to go back and collectively start to look at the women, in the history. So these kind of practices of inclusivity, not at all tokenism, but the way in which we can talk about that in the history module becomes a very important sort of start to that. Another is at the end of the course, or the latter part of the course, the dissertation also connects back to the history module. And in between, when they do practices, when they do projects, there are several exercises, several thought process guide them to looking at their own history of image. And also we think about the history of India itself and try to open it up beyond certain limitations of the political sort of framework, and say that, look at the parallel happenings which happened in let's say Southeast Asia or Thailand, or similarities, dissimilarities, peculiarities. Yeah. I hope I have answered your question. I can only go around these questions.
So one last question, and just if you can answer it in about 3 to 4 minutes, if
Yeah.
possible, is we've talked about histories. Can you talk about, in one sense, photography and new media a little bit?
Right.
There's such a transition that has taken place. It's not recent. It's been coming since like the late 90s, from still to moving image, for instance. So how do you kind of sensitize your students to a kind of media history as well as, as it were, practice driven?
Yeah, that's, I think the students especially are at an advantage at NID because there are so many other disciplines, and there is a discipline called the media design, which is our neighboring discipline. And often we try to think along together with them. And also in the past, we've introduced courses in projection mapping, in thinking about uh, um, programming, or ideas about video art, or sort of incorporating or embracing the internet in their imaging, etc. One of the questions that floats around in the department also is how to photograph the internet, which I think is an interesting sort of thought process. So students are very much um, encouraged to look at the present moment and to sort of make work and sort of refer to the image flux that they consume every day. And several exercises have been introduced. One of the key things that I can think of is also, for I think last year or the year before, one of the thematics for the design project, or one of the projects, was also this text called Big Flat Now, from Radical Cut Up, this collection of essays by Lucas Freire. So students were responding to that, which is essentially talking about a certain flatness of images, of time that we all go through. So yes, definitely, I think there is equal emphasis on history as well as trying to understand the present or the inevitable future that looms around. Yeah. But those are the things that we are also excited as a department to look at, to how photography can appear or show itself, in new formats, new formalities. Yeah. Yeah, if I may add, one of our students, alumni, who did a wonderful project, Vamika Jain, of looking at or understanding or decoding Instagram and its connection to tourist images. So, wonderful project, and I hope it goes public and people can see it soon.